Hello and welcome back to Afterglow, episode 87. My voice is somewhat back, still a little under the weather, but not nearly as bad. Good enough to record at least. However, I have indeed relocated from Ohio to Indiana, so episodes will be a bit more sporadic. I know I normally like to record and get something out every week. We might be doing bi-weekly, maybe even slipping once every 3 weeks, just for a little bit while we get stuff settled up and settled in and whatnot. But enough about all that behind-the-scenes stuff. Let's talk about today's episode, which is Actraiser for the Super Nintendo. Really like this game. It's kind of like a cross of a standard side-scrolling adventure game with SimCity, which sounds like such a weird mashup, but it works so good in this game, and we will talk more about it after our first music break. And welcome back. So, this game, like so many others in the Super Nintendo, was a rental for me, which I rented quite often. But, the cover of the box didn't tell you very much. Of course, if you're listening to this episode, you can see the cover, but it's literally some pyramids with some lightning coming down on them, and that's it. It is an Enix game, though. And at the time, I knew Enix from Dragon Warrior, so I thought it might be kind of interesting to check out. And got it, and you start off in a sky palace with a little angel more or less telling you that you're God. Kind of a failure as a god, though, considering the fact that these regular enemies can take you out pretty easily if you're not careful. But in the sky palace, you can move around the world, and you can select where to start, although the game does kind of railroad you. There's only one starting area that you can actually go with, and the other areas unlock as you go. So, you go ahead and select your starting area, and there is a very cool Mode 7 effect as you go down the fight, where the globe kind of like spins as you're going down towards it, which is a really cool effect. But the game starts out, and it is a side-scroller game. You've got a sword, and you're just trying to kill off the enemies as you make your way in. And then there's a boss at the end of the level, which I thought was kind of cool. The boss is like a centaur with a spear that charges you. He's a bit tricky, but you can figure him out pretty easily. But after that, it goes to a weird kind of SimCity mode, which is the best way I can explain it, where you actually have to guide the expansion of this town, and you've got these pits that are spawning enemies that you actually need to guide the people to in order to stop enemies from spawning on the map. And you can also get like magic items, and as you're supposed to be the god of this world, you have abilities as well that you can do. You can bring rain, you can bring lightning, you can bring earthquakes, and you can do all these in certain areas to like clear the area, defend the area, or maybe just, fight drought and whatnot. It's kind of a cool touch. And while you're doing all this, you control the angel that you're talking to. He's got a little bow and arrow, so he's fighting the enemies as they try to spawn in. And at the same time, you're doing your SimCity thing, helping build this city, which is really, really neat. And during all this, the town people kind of talk to you to kind of flesh out the story somewhat. And at the end of your city building, you unlock the next level, which is usually the second boss level. Most of the city areas that you go into, before you start building, you'll have your first fight. Then you'll build and expand your city, and then you'll have your second fight. And then after that, oftentimes, you move on to the next one. Although there are reasons to go back. Like if I remember right, only one city mastered bridges, and you gotta go back there to get bridges to bring them to another area. Or one city mastered, I think, growing wheat, and you have to take wheat seeds from them to another area. That way, that area can grow foods to help famine. So it was kind of a cool touch. The game can be incredibly difficult. I did make it to the end. However, at the end, there is a huge boss rush. And without using Game Genie cheats, I never could actually get through this boss rush. I think a lot of that is because I was pretty reliant on using the magic system in this game to get through bosses. But, of course, your magic usage is limited. You get some cool abilities, but they are limited. So if I'm relying on them to take on the bosses, of course, I'm running out of magic during the boss rush before I get to the last guy. And the last guy, because your god, is supposed to be Satan, which is kind of a neat touch. But, yeah, without actually cheating, I could not beat this game. I did beat it, of course, but I did use a Game Genie to beat it. That being said, it's a lot of fun. The combination of the side-scrolling platforming and fighting against the kind of simulation section, while you're still kind of doing some overhead shooter stuff, not a whole lot. Most of that is honestly just you expanding the city while keeping the monsters at bay. But just having those two really distinct different game modes kind of mixes it up just enough to where you're never actually really bored. You're always looking forward to that next side-scrolling platforming section, but then after you beat it, you're looking forward to the next city-building section as well. So the game doesn't really get old, which is a fantastic touch. Also, the soundtrack in this game is absolutely stunning. It's got an incredible soundtrack, especially for being a fairly early Super Nintendo game. There's some mastery seen in this game with the soundtrack that even a lot of later Super Nintendo games just couldn't really pull off. The game did get a sequel with Actraiser 2, however, I didn't play a whole lot of it, and the sequel was only the platforming stuff. They completely removed the city building stuff, which is really a shame, because it's honestly what gave the game kind of its uniqueness. They took away what made the game unique, and it's really a bummer. I never actually bought this game. It was always a rental for me. That being said, I did emulate it quite a bit whenever I got into emulation, and that's honestly the first time I beat it was through an emulator. But I always had fun with it. Of course, you don't really see much of this game these days, other than we did get a remake in Actraiser Renaissance. But it's not the same game, and they added a third mode to it, which at first you're like, oh man, the two modes are cool, and the third one must be really cool. And to a degree it is. It's like a tower defense mode. But, I mean, it just it slows it down too much in my opinion. I mean, graphically, it's a step up. The music, I actually prefer the Super Nintendo version. But, yeah, those tower defense sections kind of let the game down. It's a bummer, because I do love me a good tower defense game every once in a while, but, Actraiser Renaissance just was not it. I got on Steam, and, of course, I also got it on mobile. Definitely gave it a shot, and it's enjoyable for sure. If you've never played Actraiser before, and you're don't want to mess with emulating it, Renaissance is a decent game. But I think it really does pale in the shadow of the original. Just, the original's so good. I mean, I like Renaissance, but I'm really afraid that, we're not going to see any more of Actraiser again for another 30 years or so, just because I don't think Renaissance did well, because it's an okay game, but it's definitely not as good as that original. But that's enough of me rambling about my old memories. Go back and check out the Super Nintendo version. It's worth either picking up a cart, loading it up in an emulator. If you're really, really into it, rather than check out the second game, I would check out Renaissance after you check out the original. I do feel that Renaissance is better than Actraiser 2. But it definitely is not as good as the original. But let's listen to some more of that awesome soundtrack before we roll that outro. As always, thank you for listening to another episode of Afterglow. If you're interested in exploring some more of Afterglow, be sure to check out the link tree in the show notes. You can come over to our Discord and chat with some other friends of the show. You can also go to our Patreon if you'd like to fund the show for just $1 a month. If you do the funding, you also get a shout out at the end of every episode. There's also a merch store in there if you'd like to grab like an Afterglow t-shirt or something. There's all kinds of stuff in there. There's also links to all the friends of the show. There are all kinds of other podcasts if you like this kind of content. Be sure to check out everyone there. Speaking of friends of the show, our show logo is done from TobyVonDoom from Secret Levels, and our intro and outro music is done by Grim from the Lost and Gone podcast. And, of course, we've got some more friends of the show that get special shout-outs that they have done at the end of our episodes, which you can listen to right now.
Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers. It's me, Martin, and you can join me on YouTube where I have hundreds of videos covering a huge range of video game topics. I've got top 10s, hidden gems, console-focused A to Zs, as well as dedicated videos to topics like Doom mods, 3D platform games, ninja games, pirate games, and more. I cover all systems from Commodore 64 right up to modern consoles. Nothing gaming is off the table. So be sure to search for the Reviews Brothers on YouTube, as well as on Instagram and TikTok for hundreds of retro and modern video game reviews.
Hey there, Afterglow gang. Keith Gasper here, the host of what I'm told is the #1 retro gaming podcast available on the internet, the Main Quest Podcast. The Main Quest is an ongoing project wherein I'm replaying the entire library of games that I grew up with, sharing my memories associated with those games, and deciding if that bit of media still holds up today. Every episode I am often, but not always, joined by a friend as we discuss the gameplay, presentation, and most importantly, where that game came from, who took part in its inception, and what kind of legacy it left behind, if any, because honestly not every game can be Tetris. It's not enough to walk away from each episode having had fun, but hopefully, you also learned something about your favorite video game, or maybe even a game that you've never even heard of. So come on over, have a listen to the extensive backlog of Main Quest Podcast, available of course on all major podcasting platforms, and look out for brand new episodes coming in 2025. And of course, hey, always remember, it's okay to like a video game.
For more than 15 years, Retro Gaming Roundup has been the centre of your retro gaming universe, with top 10s, interviews, game reviews, news, and much more from all over the globe. Be sure to tune in every month for a new dose of Retro Gaming Roundup. That's RetroGamingRoundup.com.
Hello, my name is Aaron. I'm one half of SuperPod Saga, a topical variety video game podcast fueled entirely by nostalgia and unleaded gasoline. SuperPod Saga, we discuss a different video game topic each and every week. We have new episodes every single Monday covering a different video game topic. More than anything, we want to entertain our listeners and make you feel like you're one of the boys, like you're hanging out at a campfire with some of your best zany, caffeine-powered buddies and just talking about your favorite games and all that stuff. Stop on down to SuperPod Saga. It's on every podcatcher there is. If it's not, let me know and we'll get on it. But again, SuperPod Saga, stop on by.